Hello friends, Pat and Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And today we're going to be talking about homeschooling, common fears, misconceptions, and some of our recommendations.
Okay.
Okay. Want me to start? Probably should, huh?
So what do you want to start with?
I want to talk first about some common fears because I know there's a lot of people out there that are getting frustrated with what they're seeing going on in the public realm, and they're really wanting to homeschool, but they're afraid because they have some common fears and they probably think they're unique. And they'll probably be surprised to find out these common fears, every parent has them all the way across the board, no matter who they are, no matter how well educated they are, no matter their personality style, they are the most common fears. Top two.
Fear would be is I'm not good enough to teach, I'm inadequate, I don't have enough education, things such as that. Am I right on what you're thinking,
Right.
Mama? And don't get me wrong, there are good public school instructors out there. This is not a bash against the people who really care about their students.
Right.
We want to start off with that. The
Yeah,
most
that's
important
important.
thing is it's really hard to be a good teacher and instruct 30 kids at a time. There's not a whole lot of one-on-one going on there.
Especially with the laws and limitations and things you're not allowed to do or talk about.
Exactly.
You're very, very limited as a public school teacher what you can do to be able to, you know,
Properly instruct.
Yeah.
And so you have such a wide range of different personalities in there that have to be handled differently. And you as a parent of your children know your kids' personalities, you know them one-on-one, and I'm here to tell you that you can homeschool your kids.
You can, regardless of your education. As someone who's taught ballet to kids of all ages, from 3 clear on up to even 20-year-olds, I have, which 20-year-olds aren't kids, but you know what I mean.
Everybody's a kid to us anymore.
I've had a wide range of ages, I've had a wide range of personality styles, I've had a wide range of learning styles. And it is tough to, just when you think you have it figured out as a teacher, you get someone that comes in that has a completely different learning style from everyone else. And so you got to break it down and figure out what's going to work best for this child. And in my own personal business, I could do that for the most part. But in a public school situation, teachers they don't have that kind of time with the amount of kids they have to work with. So no matter how good the teacher is, no matter how well-meaning they are, and how much they care about their kids, they're still very, very limited. So back to the main point, number one common fear is, am I smart enough? Yes, you are. You are smart enough. A lot of people think they have to have a teaching degree. Well, I tell you, I've even seen parents who have teaching degrees that don't think they're smart enough. Now, all I have is just enough college credits for my state to make it that I could homeschool my children on my own. And I guess I should have started this off for anyone who's coming in new, first time seeing us, that our kids are grown. We've already been there, done that as far as homeschooling. And I'll be going over some of the curriculum I used and some things that I wish I would have done differently along the way. However, our kids have turned out pretty good, and I'm very happy with them and what they've obtained, and
they have a little head about them.
And a good work ethic.
And a good work ethic.
And another thing you have to remember is, as you're going along, especially if you're starting out with your children rather on the young side, you will learn right along with them. If you've got good curriculum, you can learn right along with them. So even if it's stuff that you don't know much about, you will learn it too. And it's just a wonderful experience for both the child and the parent, because there were a lot of things that I was rather not interested in the public school system, but when it came to like history and certain other things, I didn't find interesting in public school until I started teaching my own kids. with the proper type of curriculum that's going to suit your needs and the needs of your child when it comes to learning styles, there is history or whatever it is that might have been your tough subject will suddenly come to life for you, and the desire to want to learn will be there for you. And when your children see that desire, they will latch onto that, and it will give them the desire to want to learn as well. The second most common fear that parents have is, I'm not patient enough.
That
right?
might be true.
And I tell you, though I could be pretty patient with my students in dance and martial arts, when it came to my own children, I had very little patience. My oldest one, who was very literal thinking, and anytime he came across a rule like in the English language that we continually break, it would make him angry, because it's like, why have rules? And so this would kind of cause a lot of tension between the two of us. And so just like with your education, as you are instructing your children, you will learn patience along the way. There's no better way to learn patience and become a more patient person than by teaching your own children. I tell you, yes, it can be difficult at times, but it is so incredibly rewarding as both you and your child grow in these areas. Mm-hmm. And as I was talking about with my oldest son, one of the things I told him is that, I'm trying to be a better mom and be a more patient mom, but I also need your help to do it. And don't do the things that push my buttons and make me angry. And just that one thing that I said really changed things for me and my oldest son from then on. Because then he realized this is a team effort. We're working together so that he could get a better education and I could become a better parent. Mm-hmm. So, changing the focus on that really, really helped. So, anything you would like to add to the...
Well, earlier we said that, you can teach your kids. And I know that this is situational, because a lot of times both parents have to work, and teaching your kids would be a very difficult task to do. But if you have little ones and it's a single income family, you might consider looking into homeschool a little bit more seriously. I know there's a lot of homestead channels out there, and people trying to kind of live off the land and off the farm. Really consider the skills that you can teach your kids on the farm.
Right.
And, you're in a perfect learning environment to teach those kids. You're teaching them animal husbandry and farming and building skills and all of these things. You might not be a master craftsman in all these things. You might not, have an education in, taking care of animals or whatever like that, but learn. The best way to teach your kids is to have them right next to you and learn right along with them.
There was a time I used to think that only people that were one parent stayed home, they were the only ones that could homeschool. Well, as an experienced homeschool mom, I can tell you this. I think even if both parents are working outside the home and it's important enough to you, you can find a way to make it work. Because really, as far as book work goes, that only takes a couple hours most a day, no matter the age of the child. And as the children get old enough where they can be self-taught, there's very little interaction needed with the parent. And so it's a matter of just having them do it. Obviously, childcare issues are going to be a concern if you're both at work. But as far as the time, well, think how much hours of homework the kids get from public school. So basically what they're doing is they're sitting in school all day, not really learning much of anything, then coming home and putting in the same time in their homework that they could have used just doing homeschool and having that done at any time of the day that was most convenient, so that they're not schooling, doing book work all day. If they're homeschooled, they're only doing book work 1 to 2 hours a day. The rest of their education is going to come naturally while they're working around the house, helping with chores, and obviously age relevance is going to be a thing, you know, in the shop, building something with dad or whatever it is. So that's where most of their real education actually comes from. And clearly you got to have some book work for math and certain things like that, obviously. But we'll be going over that in a minute. So I do think it's possible to make it happen. And one more thing I wanted to say about that is look into your state laws. Though my personal opinion is the state should have nothing to do with or say how you should educate your child. But regardless, like our state, you don't even have to, most people here don't even know this. You are not even required by law to start educating your child, you know, in a more formal atmosphere until the age of 8. And this is important to know because a lot of people are being taught that the younger you get them into school, the better they'll be. And that is absolutely not true. Now, there are some children that are ready to start reading at the age of 4. It might be a little more rare, but some are. Some are not ready to start reading or grasping any of the concepts until maybe 10 or 11, and maybe even older. And some of it isn't about how brilliant they are. It's about physiological. Are their eye muscles ready to be able to try to string together words and stuff like that? There's a certain amount of growth that has to happen both emotionally and mentally and physically for children to be able to be ready to do that kind of stuff, to be able to sit down in a classroom or sit down at a desk and do book work. So you should not feel, even if you decide to wait, let's say you decide to public school your kids. If you decide to wait until they're 8 years old to put them in public school, they will most likely catch up very, very quickly. Going to kindergarten is not necessarily going to make them smarter. Starting to teach them at 4 or 3 is not going to make them smarter and give them a head start. In a rare occasion, yes, this is true. Most of the time, it is not. So knowing that should help you quite a bit. I think the longer children are home with their parents at a young age, the better off they're going to be in the long run. Again, this isn't just as someone who's an experienced homeschool mom. This is someone who's as an experienced instructor of all ages in both dance and martial arts for 27 years. And that's just 27 years here. I used to also teach at a town that I grew up in for a couple of years. So 29 years at least of educating children. So now I want to go on to the 2 of the most common misconceptions or concerns that a lot of people have, or the things that you'll get approached with when you decide to homeschool. And anyone out there who's already homeschooling, has already made that decision, already knows what the top number 1 is. What about socialization? Oh, good gravy. Well, first of all, who says I want my kids socialized? There's something to think about, especially in a public school setting atmosphere. How realistic is that when it comes to once they graduate and get out of school, what's real life socialization? It's not what happens in a public school system. Real life socialization is what happens at home with your parents, with the siblings, with the friends down the street, when you go to church and you're hanging out with people, when you go to a friend's house, when you meet people in the store or on the street. This is where real socialization skills are learned, not in the public school system. It is it's a misnomer to even call what they do in the public school system, as far as that's concerned, socialization. So
that's the biggest argument that you're going to get.
Biggest one.
People are going to try to talk you out of homeschooling your kids because of the socialization issues. And the thing about it is, in school, they have a teacher that is there to babysit and to try to teach your kids activities and different things, you know, to get their motor skills and their reasoning abilities to start functioning. But the beauty about homeschooling is it's just like real life. When those kids get out of high school, they're going to be exposed to kids younger than them. They're going to be exposed to older folks.
Right.
You know, they're going to be exposed to the full gamut of ages, races, beliefs, and what have you out there. So when you send your kid to public school, they're with kids their age all day long, and then they come home, and you know, a lot of times they park in front of the television set, and they get raised by the programming. So if you're homeschooling, a lot of times what people will do is say, hey, you know, I'm not good with math or social studies or home ec or reading or whatever like that. There's a lot of people out there that can tandem up together. We didn't necessarily do this.
No.
We got with a homeschool kind of a network and got together every now and then to kind of get
once a year.
Get the kids together, and that was kind of fun for the kids. But what you're going to find out is, you know, you can network with other people that have a skill in a particular trade. Let's say you don't have farm animals, but you want them to learn agriculture, you want them to learn animal husbandry and stuff like that. Well, then maybe you have a local farm that maybe those kids can work at, but you're going to be thwarted with the excuse that, oh, the socialization. What about the socializations? They can't develop my socialization skills. But now, if you know your kid the best, and you know what their needs are, you know what their strengths and their weaknesses are, you can work on those individual strengths and weaknesses in certain particular ways.
Right.
Now, our kids, you know, as far as I can tell, they're successful.
The second big concern that people have is, well, what about PE? When we were growing up, you know, we didn't have to have names like free range children. We just were. You know, we got to get outside and play, and we wanted to. There was no such thing as video games. We had TV, but there were no video games to, you know, sit in and stare at the TV all the time. You know, we got outside, we played baseball with our friends, and we built go-karts and ran down the hills. And well, he did more of that, but I've been on the go-kart things before. Where I grew up, there was orchards. We used to go play in the orchards, hide and seek. PE, like so many other things, can happen naturally. Now, here with me, the way I'm set up I was set up as a dance school, and then later a martial arts school that, you know, they were both going on at the same time. I started putting my kids in dance, and for them it was more, wasn't necessarily just ballet, and no, I didn't make my boys wear tutus, but I started them off in dance at a young age just so that they could get in there with other kids and have something active to do. But I didn't force them to stay in it if they didn't want to. And Ryan stayed in until he was 14. And by that point, we had already been in martial arts for several years. So our studio also became a place where we learned martial arts together. My oldest son and me started the martial arts here. We had an instructor come in and teach us, and he had other students in the class, and that's what got us going until we got our own black belts and then started our own classes that way. And my youngest son also then followed suit, and then we all ended up getting our black belts. So we had that as far as PE. Now, obviously, that's what worked for us. That may not work for you. But again, going back to the fact that if kids are allowed to be kids, they're getting PE. If they're out there playing in the mud and splashing around in the ditch and using, when it fills up with rainwater, and using it as a swimming pool, that's PE. It doesn't have to be some set thing that's so focused on sports idolatry that, you know, there's other things besides that. There's other ways that it really, PE is all just a matter of getting out and getting exercise. And let's go back to the whole, if you're a homesteader, which most of you watching us probably are, they're going to get PE just doing their chores.
Right.
So not only are they getting PE, they're learning skills at the same time. And they're learning how to take care of themselves, how to be responsible for another life besides their own when they're taking care of the animals. You know, or even if you don't have farm animals, maybe you just have a garden. And early on, when I just started with growing tomatoes, and I kind of got my kids involved with that, and they loved seeing things grow and being somewhat responsible for something else. I mean, they learn so much from these simple things. Well, they're not necessarily simple, but simple in the respect that we try to overcomplicate things, thinking, okay, my kid has to learn how to play basketball and has to learn how to play football. It's like, no, they don't. No, they don't. So don't let the PE thing and don't let the socialization thing hold you back, because these things come naturally, as does pretty much the rest of the learning that I'll get to in a bit. Before I get into some suggestions for books and different things I recommend that you have on hand, there is one more thing I wanted to say, and that is about learning styles. Each child, you will find, is going to be very different. Now, I only had two, and just out of those two boys, they were like night and day in the way they learned. My oldest was a quick read. He learned how to read. It was so easy to teach him how to read. I was blown away. I'm like, wow, that was a piece of cake. So that by the time he finished first grade, he was reading fourth and fifth grade level books. Now, my younger son, he had some developmental issues. Well, they're not issues. He was just slower in his physiological development. That reading was an incredible struggle. And I tried everything with him. I thought, okay, I've done this once. This is going to be a piece of cake. No, it wasn't. Tried every reading type book I used with my oldest son had to be shoved away and forgotten about. I finally just said, forget this stuff. We're just gonna do things a little more natural and let things kind of happen as they may. And at least by this point, I got him, my youngest son, to the point that he was struggling with the reading, but he could read some things as long as it was very simple. And so we just said, okay, you got to read a little bit out of your Bible every day. You know, you got to read, we had a set time. He had to read for this long out of his Bible, you know, his kid's Bible every day. But eventually what happened is he got to an age where suddenly reading became important to him. He realized how important it was and how much he needed to do it. And he wanted to start writing his own stories. And what better way for a child to not only learn to read, but to learn language arts, just, you know, and how to spell, but to just say, okay, go ahead, sit down at the computer and start writing whatever you want. And I can proofread, and he would know when something was spelled wrong because spell check was on. And then, you know, he would ask me for help, and it was so natural and so simple. And now I swear he has better language arts grasp, a better grasp on language arts than I do. And it's just, but you know, he was an older child when he finally got really good at it. But so don't, you know, when you go to each child, and don't get discouraged if one has a harder time grasping it, and don't force them to try to grasp it if they're not ready, because that's only going to make it worse. It puts a stress on them. And this is the other thing that tends to happen in public school. You throw a kid into school at 3, 4, and 5, and if they're not ready for these concepts, then they're going to get held back. And then they're going to feel stupid, and they're going to get stressed, and it's going to put more pressure on them to the point they're going to just want to give up and not even try. And you don't want that to happen. You want it to come naturally. So now, onto the books and that natural learning thing I'm going to get to in a minute, the first thing I want to start with is just a couple of basic things that everybody should have on hand, whether they're homeschooling or not. And these are kind of the duh factor, but I'll show them anyway.
Something besides a computer.
A good dictionary. Yes, we can look these things up online, but I'm talking hard copy. Okay? This is going to be important not just for you, but for your child as they get to that point where they're self-taught. Because that's the other thing about homeschooling that's so great, is once you can get them to where they're reading, they've got good reading skills and good reading comprehension, they can pretty much teach themselves everything else, and you don't have to do that much, but just double check and make sure they're getting their work done.
Well, because basically, what when you get to be an adult, you don't have an instructor there teaching you, taking you by the hand. You got to be self-taught on a lot of things.
Right.
So, what better skill to learn is how to be self-taught. Not that you just shove the kid in the room and say, hey, come out when your homework's done. But hey, shove the kid in the room and tell him, say, hey, if you got a question, come out and see if we can work through it. It seems to me our kids can figure things out. So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, and then also I didn't bring in here, I think it's a great idea if you can have a good source of encyclopedia. But, like we used to have all those encyclopedias. Something in a hard copy is great, even if it's old and outdated. At least there's still going to be great stuff in there you can find. Now, other thing I would say is a good thesaurus. And I will link to these below if you don't already have them. Now, the very next thing I'm going to recommend, and I think every homeschooler should have this, and that is the Charlotte Mason Companion. Incredibly important book. Because if you read through this before you start teaching your kids, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have started with this. She talks so much about the whole natural learning, and it's like, oh my goodness, there was so much I could have done with my children that would have been so much more simple had I followed the basic principles of this book. And just like with any other book, if I can find it on Amazon, I will link to it below. And then along with that, I would say get the Simply Grammar. It goes off the whole, this is by Charlotte Mason, and it's very, very simple, laid out grammar plans, and I found this for a good price. I actually gave my initial ones away when I was done homeschooling my kids, and I got disappointed because I realized I'm looking forward to hopefully homeschooling my grandchildren if need be, or if nothing else, I want to make sure that my grandchildren have these books. So I found them used on Amazon and bought those. Now,
learning comes a lot easier if the kids really enjoy the subject matter. If you can somehow put it in such a way that it is beneficial to them. Where I failed as a father in the shop is that, I used to make them get out there and help me out with different things. But if, when we got the dog and we built a dog house out there for him, they wanted to be out there building a dog house. So it's like,
was cool.
Hello?
And they learned some skills while they were doing it.
Yeah,
so
and I didn't figure
great.
that out until I was a lot older. But if you're just getting into homeschooling, the thing you might want to consider is doing little projects with them. Just being patient, let them make mistakes. Of course, when you got power tools, there's some things that you don't want to turn them loose on early on. But when it comes to paintbrushing and nailing and stuff like that, let them mar up a board or get some paint on some stuff. But rusty tools out in the yard, exercise a little patience. The neat thing about the rusty tools out in the yard is that they're handling them. They're doing stuff with them. Obviously, you just can't let them go willy-nilly. You want to teach them safety. You want to teach them how to take care of things. But things are going to get lost. Things are going to get broke. As far as the shop thing, or even or even if Mrs. Rain is teaching them how to cook in the kitchen or
Which we
whatever
did.
like that, a glass is going to get broke, milk is going to get spilt, and all those different things. Just that's all a part of the learning curve. So, but get them in there making cookies or making a doghouse, things that they're going to benefit from. They're really going to want to jump in there and start doing that kind of stuff. So.
Now, another great resource I want to mention, and this is an online resource, and I did check before I started this video to make sure it's still out there, and it is enchantedlearning.com. I found it when I was looking for some worksheets on things, because I decided, and if you don't know about unit studies, learn about unit studies. You can put together your own unit study, and it is just a really fun way to learn. So 3 of the years out of that I was teaching my boys, there was 3 of those years I took out and focused on unit studies, and those unit studies being focusing on different countries or a set of different countries. So the first year, and this is the one I can't find, we focused on Italy because we have some heritage there. And you can go to enchantedlearning.com and print off some different worksheets and things. Like the year we studied, we did some Asian countries, like it was Japan, Korea, and China. And so you can print these off, and there's actually questions that they ask about it. So this is, obviously China's flag. Here's one where they learned a little bit of the language. And they got to color it in, and then they had to write the word and what it stood for. And I think that one was German. And so lots and lots of great stuff there. So if you choose a unit study, you can go on there and start looking up anything, even if it's about horses. And the great thing about unit studies is you can find a way to incorporate everything from history to geography to home ec skills. So like with our Italy one, we learned how to make tiramisu. Actually, I think I already knew how to make it then, but I got the kids in the kitchen and we made tiramisu together and a couple of other traditional Italian dishes. And so we were doing some home ec. Math was the only thing we didn't incorporate into these particular unit studies, but everything else, they're getting some language arts as they're learning these different things, and they're having to answer the questions, and they're having to practice their writing skills. And so that is just a really great place. And there's many other things besides just countries that you can focus on. That was another thing, and I'm hoping I can find these to link to. There are these vellum sheets, and I would buy them. I bought a whole bunch of them, and I stuck them together so that I would have it almost like a folder. They're actually separate, and a lot of people might not even know about these vellum sheets. You can write with pencil. You can see there's pencil writing on here where my kids were practicing, and all you need is a tiny bit of Vaseline and a rag, and this will wipe right off. I can't believe this is still on here after all these years. But just a plain rag and a little bit of Vaseline, and just clean it right off, and they can write on it again. So then you can take your, here's your, we were doing italics, and you can just set the worksheet in there like that, and they can write on it, and that way you can use the worksheets. If you buy worksheets, you can use them again and again and again with each child, as long as are just invaluable. I highly recommend you get yourself some of these. I used them in a lot of their workbooks, and not just for writing, but their language arts books, and their math books. They used them in that. So really, again, if I can find these to link to, I will do that. I don't know that they'll be available on Amazon, but I'll see if I can find them. But anyway, they're called vellum sheets, and you can write on them with pencil. That's what makes it so great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you can use the same curriculum for the next kid.
And you don't even have to use up the eraser to erase it. You just wipe it off. These are going to be definitely a matter of choice. I do have language arts, in general was the learning language arts through literature. I thought this was really just a great system for the most part, especially for grades 3 and up. I wasn't crazy about the K and the 1 through 2 grades, but the 3 and up I thought were done really well. And they're kind of put together a lot like a way a unit study would be, in the fact that you're getting a little bit of everything in here. Again, everything but mathematics. You get a little bit of science, you get a little bit of history, you get Bible in here. It's just everything, but it's all centered around learning language arts. And so while they're going through this, they're learning everything else as well. And there's different writing assignments and stuff. And I loved these books. Again, they were a little more on the expensive side. You have to have 2 books for each grade, because you got to have the teacher's manual and then the workbook itself. But again, I recommend it myself. I think for most people who are getting started out, I think it's a great way to start is with these books. And then Saxon Math was, from about grades 4 on was my choice. And by that point, the kids were able to read and correct their own work. And because I just gave them the teacher's manual with the answers in it, and at that point it was kind of the honor system. I trusted my kids and I knew it, they did. If they went back and they corrected their own work and they saw that they got something wrong, they would go figure out and rework that problem until they got it right. And obviously it's getting your kids to that point where they can do that, and that you can trust them to do that, and you still need to check up on them every now and then and make sure they're not just cheating. But if they've got a good moral compass, what they're going to do, like my oldest son in particular, it just anger him if he got anything wrong, and he would not stop until he got it right and it matched the book. So
well, if you spot check them or do a little test with them every now and then, you're going to find out whether or not they're flubbing.
And then for younger ages for math, a really fun one, and again, this was stuff I gave away to people that were homeschooling. I wish I wouldn't have, but I'm glad that somebody's using it. And that was the Cuisenaire rods. Some of you may have heard of it. I will link to those below, because I'm positive you can find them on Amazon. And then get the books to go along with them that are called Miquon Math. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing those right. That's just how I've always said it. But the Cuisenaire rods it's a very hands-on way to learn math, and it's wonderful, especially for the more kinetic learner type child, or the very tactile child, or the child that likes bright colors and stuff, because for me, I think that would have been the best way for me to learn math when I was growing up, because it's just very, very hands-on and practical, especially for the younger children up to about 3rd grade. And one other thing I'd recommend, though I didn't bring the workbook in, I don't know what I did with it, is for another language. 2 things I would recommend learning as a second language would be sign language, which was a really cool thing for me, because I started learning sign language when I was 14 so I could incorporate it with dance. But sign language is very practical and just a great thing to learn, and easy to learn because of how it fits into our language. And then the other one I recommend, and again, this is completely a matter of choice, and that is Latin. I know people are going to say, but this is a dead language, it has no use. Well, actually, that's not true. It may not be that countries are speaking in Latin. However, there are so much of our English language and many other languages that have a good Latin base to them, or have a lot of Latin in them, that once you start learning the Latin, like here's some worksheets I printed off, and I will also try to link to this book below. I learned things just by finding some basic, where our root words, so some of our English words come from the Latin. It made me understand those English words so much better and what they truly meant. So I think Latin is great. And then that way, if the child decides later they want to learn Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, French, or any other Latin-based language, then they've got a good structure to work off of, because it's just gonna cross right over. So it's just a real smooth transition. Thing that I highly recommend, absolutely I think this is one of those things that should be right up there with you must get. Unlike, you know, maybe your choice of math, language arts, and language, that's got to be completely your choice. But I think these things here are invaluable. And that is, I only have the first two sets, Biology 101 and Chemistry 101. There's also, I have the light shining on, there's also a Physics 101 I still want to get my hands on, but by the time they came out with it, my kids were done schooling and we didn't need it anymore. The biology, and I will link to these as well. Biology 101 it's the people that put this together, these things together, did such an amazing job. It is so entertaining and informational, and especially if you are a believer, the biology, the way he put it, it's a family that did this, is based on the 6 days of creation. And so it really breaks it down, and yet it's totally scientific, and yet based on the 6 days of creation, and it's fun. It's got humor in it, just really well put together. And then the chemistry, again, same thing. It's just fascinating. Well, I took chemistry, I think, in 9th grade, and I just thought it was, except for when we were actually doing the hands-on lab work, I thought it was so boring trying to learn the periodic table. But this makes it fun and entertaining, and it's just so great to be able to learn something that just seems so dry in public school and be excited about it. And I cannot recommend these enough. And I know that if you buy like the whole set, they have a good deal. And I actually emailed the what is the name of their thing? Westfield Studios is the name of it. And anyway, the guy, the dad, I emailed them just to thank them. I didn't expect to hear back from them. I just went to their website, contacted them through there, and told them how much I enjoyed their stuff and what a blessing it was. And I was surprised to get an email back and how much they appreciated my comment. But
Very personable.
yes, very neat people. So please check it out. I think it's just another invaluable resource that everybody should have on hand. And one of these days I'm going to remember to get my hands on that physics set too, just so I can have it. I would like to just watch it for myself. If nothing else, I think it's great. So anyway, was there anything else you wanted to add?
I think we're kind of long in the tooth now.
Yeah, it's pretty long.
I think she pretty much got everything. Again, you can tell she's very passionate about this. We are very passionate about that. You know, take control of what goes in the mind, in the eye gate, and in the ear gate, and just pay attention to what your kids are learning. A lot of times people can't I don't want to say can't, but it's very impractical for them to homeschool their kids. And you got to realize that the public school didn't really take off until like the early 1800s.
When the state took over the school.
And before that, kids were taught at the house. Kids were taught at the neighbors. Kids were taught in groups. When there was a barn raising, kids learned how to, build things. They used to learn how to cook right alongside mom. They used to take care of the animals. All these different skills were learned outside of the schoolroom, and miraculously enough, they survived.
Right, they did good. I mean,
but it's important that kids learn how to run a computer, and kids learn how to do some of these modern skills that are very important this day and age to get by in a competitive world. But it's not an impossibility. Your kids won't be some sort of socially challenged person when they get to be old enough to get out of the house or whatever like that if they're homeschooled. Our kids are doing well. Justin works at the store, you know, around the public all the time. They're both very ambitious kids and young men. So you guys can do this. I mean, we could, there's a lot of things that we could have done better, especially me. But if you guys are just even thinking about homeschooling, really give us some thought. We'd like to encourage you to do so.
Right. Yes. Oh, and one more thing. And yes, those children, I think homeschooled kids have learned better social skills than those that go into the public school, because they know how to relate to people of all different ages. And my kids didn't have any problem. Once they, you know, left home, they get out there, and I mean, not even once they left home, but before that, even when as young kids, you know, they were able to communicate with adults just as easily as they could with kids their own age.
Yeah, and obviously you have to get them. You have to get them out around other family members, grandma and grandpa. Get them around the babies, you know, the nieces and nephews, and get them out with the friends and whatnot. So they can obviously, you know, you can't just have them in the house all the time, and then once they turn to be teenagers, turn them
Boot
loose,
them out.
and then there you go. But
The main purpose of this was just to say, yes, you can do it. And don't let your fears, or don't let the common arguments and the things that, and I'll be honest with you, some people will be mean about it. And just ignore it. You're just going to have to ignore it. It's you, your life, your children, and you have to decide what's best for them. And honestly, some of the worst comments I got were from people that I thought would be most likely to support me, and they were some of the meanest. But in the end, you know, it didn't matter what they thought, because I am glad I made the choice I did. I know it was right for us and for my children. And that's the choice you have to make. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. All right, so this is probably a really long video, and there's so much more I could say. And if you would like to see some updates, you have some questions that you would like to ask either one of us about, you know, how did we handle this or handle that, go ahead and put those in comments below, and then we will approach that in a future video down the road if that's what you'd like to see from us, and we'd be happy to do that, because again, this is a very important topic, and now more than ever, I would love to see everybody being able to do what they were created to do and the way God made us, and that is to teach their own children. That was the way it was supposed to be.
boy, you know what? If there's the YouTube and there's other media out there. There's so many different tapes you can buy, educational type tapes you can buy. If you feel like you're weak in an area, why don't you and your child find your favorite YouTube channel that might be able to teach some skills to your children that you want to focus on. The tapes that Heidi here mentioned, there's several different educational tapes out there that you can sit down with your kid and learn along with them. It might be fun. So it's the information is just out there for you to grab a hold of and you know, capture this opportunity.
Literally at your fingertips.
Right. So
Okay, we should finish up.
it's been long.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you were encouraged by it.
Hello. Share us with your friends and your family if you like what you're seeing.
Thanks for watching,
Take care.
and God bless.